Hi, I'm Pykno, and today we'll be taking a look at how to make your drums a little bit more snappy. First order of business is picking a decent sample. I actually have the sample that I'm using here is from a little free pack that I've got, just 10 snares that you can download off my website, link in the description below. Now, this particular snare, as you can see, has a decent amount of business going on in the initial transient, the attack, and then the decay is a bit interesting where it's quite full on all the way through and then drops down into the tail. So what we want to do is we want to accentuate just the initial attack. For this particular snare, I felt that it needed a little bit more gain, so I added a blood overdrive, adds a little bit more harmonics on the top end, and I've also added a EQ to accentuate the fundamental, which you can see right here. Once I activate the effects, you can see the fundamental notes heading right there, and I felt that it still needed a little bit more top end, so I added a little bit of a shelf from 5K onwards. That's generally where your brightness sits. As for the compression, I tend to favor the old school Fruity compressor, as the limiter compressor combo tends to distort too quickly for my liking. So full reset, threshold down all the way, ratio all the way up. I leave the release where it is. I personally prefer the hard type for snares and kicks, in fact. And what we want to hear is just that initial attack, which sounds like this. So that's the little click we want to accentuate. Back off your threshold. I tend to use a ratio of around about 4 to 1, plus minus 4 point something to 1 for a snare. And then we will just play the snare and back off the attack until we get a decent amount of body and also have that initial click be quite prominent still. That sounds about right for me. For the kick, I've done exactly the same thing. Just play around with the attack threshold and ratio until it sounds good. In this particular case, the kick sounds like this. Effects off. Effects on. Not a huge amount of difference. Not a huge amount of difference at the end of the day. You're just getting a slightly more prominent click in the front on the transient. Now, do you consider the fact that in general production, and I think most people do it this way, is that you'd run your drums into a drum bus and you'll compress them there again just to make them sit together nicely, and then you'd run it out into a master, and then you're going to compress your whole track. So the fact that you've got multiple layers of compression means that you need to be aware that over compressing it in the initial stage is going to make it sound at the end of the day quite muddy in the overall mix. The other key to making your drums sound snappy is actually working it into your mix in a way that accentuates your drums. So sidechain your kick and your snare into a bass bus. Quite often, depending on the type of trap, I will also have a lead bus or a higher frequency bus where I'll just sidechain the snare in by itself. As for the sidechaining, I personally prefer using curve 3 because it seems that the initial attack phase is a little bit faster than what it is on the other curves, so I tend to use that. Then once it comes to mixing, I tend to mix without, or I'll write the song with a master compressor on, just literally to keep that hype up while you're writing. Then I'll turn it off, have a listen to the track, pull down the bass, bring it back in up to the point where it's nice and comfortable. Then I'll back it off just a smidgen, so your drums are a bit more prominent again, and then I'll compress it by having everything else be just slightly lower than your kick and your snare before it goes into the master compressor. It tends to make them stay prominent in the mix. So what I would do is something like this. So that sounds good to me. Then I'll back it off just a smidgen. And then we'll activate the master compressor. This is real rough and ready just for the tutorial. Pushed up the ceiling, pushed up the gain, and literally just activated the saturation for a bit of soft clipping. And we end up with this. Turn it off first, run it through without the master compressor on, and then we'll have a listen to it with the master compressor turned on. Hope that helped you, and don't forget to download the freebie pack off my website. Like I say, link in the description down below. See you in the next video. Bye.